There's some requirements for apostles. I need to move forward, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Number one, apostles had to be eyewitnesses of Jesus Christ. They had to have seen him and be a witness of that. In fact, Jesus told his apostles, and over in John 15:27, don't worry about turning or looking on the screen. He says, and you also shall bear witness because you have been with me from the beginning. You know, the apostles were this special group who had witnessed Jesus Christ. In fact, in the book of Acts, when Jesus had left and they were gathered there waiting for Pentecost, and Peter, who always, gets ahead of himself, says, hey, we need to replace Judas. We need to pick someone who's been here from the beginning. As Jesus went out in and out among us, Peter understood it needed to be someone who had been there from the beginning. Disciples number two, and there were many disciples, but they were chosen directly by Christ to be apostles. On the screen, Luke chapter 6, verse 13. I love this. We're working somewhere, y'all. Give me some time. Notice it says, now it came to pass in those days that he went out to the mountain to pray, and he continued all night, this is Jesus, praying all night long to God. And when it was day, he called his disciples to himself, and from them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. Two things you want to catch there. Number one, as he prayed all night, he got up in the morning, he called all of his disciples to himself because there were many disciples. We don't even know how many there really were. There were men and women that were disciples. And at one point, he sent 70 of them out to go preach, so we know it was at least 70. And of course, in the upper room before Pentecost, there was 120 gathered. So we really don't know the number, but there were many. But out of the group of disciples, people who were following and learning from Jesus, he chose 12 men to be apostles. You with me? Apostles had to be personal students of Christ. We find Paul's testimony even in the book of Galatians when he says that I needed to make it known to you, brethren, that the gospel which I preach, or that is preached by me, is not according to man, for I neither received it from man, nor was I taught it, but it came through revelation of Jesus Christ. Paul's testimony is of seeing the risen Lord and being discipled by the risen Lord. And so that's a requirement. And then number four, the apostles' ministry was accompanied and confirmed through signs and wonders or miracles. You follow me? So an apostle must be an eyewitness of the resurrected Jesus Christ. They must have been chosen directly by him to be an apostle. They must have been a personal student of Christ. And their ministry was accompanied with confirming signs and wonders that confirmed the word which they were teaching, actually. And so, as a foundational ministry, the apostles had the authority given by Christ to establish the church and to establish it through the writing of Scripture. Are you with me? And this is good because now, because of this, we can exclude all the other things that are brought to the church that don't line up with that which we've already received. So therefore, all of the writings of the Watchtower Society pretty much go in the trash. All of the writings of the Mormon church that are extra biblical can pretty much go in the trash because we have received all of that which we need, which lays a foundation for us, which is in safety for us and gives us instruction on how to live as believers, what our call is, and what the church should look like. And when we gather, what our gathering should look like and how we should worship and whom we worship. Amen? It's a foundational ministry. Now, with all of that said, there are men today and throughout the history of the church since the apostles whose ministry resembles their ministry because they have kind of an apostolic type of ministry, I should say. And God uses people, I've told you before, like a John Wesley or Martin Luther during the Reformation, or John Calvin or Jonathan Edwards or a Chuck Smith or Billy Graham, a K.P. Yohannan. Many of these men, their ministries resemble. And here's why. There's some characteristics of those kind of ministries that I would say, if anybody were to argue, are there apostles in the church today? I would say no, not as the first century true apostles of Christ who had authority that no one today has, praise God. But they have a ministry that resembles it, which the church needs from season to season. And number one, here's how you know. Their ministry will impact a region of the world or a generation for the gospel's sake, adding to the kingdom. All of those men that I named, we know their names because their ministry either impacted a whole region like KP Yohanan has planted 50-something thousand churches in the region of Asia. Pastor Chuck Smith has over 2,000 churches attributed to the ministry that God gave him. Just an example, the Methodist Church, well, how many, John Wesley, many of those in town, their ministry either impacted a whole generation or a region of the world for the sake of the gospel. Number two, they were used in an unusual way by the Lord, right? A very unusual way, and you can see that as well. We don't have to go in all those details. Pastor Chuck was used in an unusual way. He was an old man with a receding hairline who reached a bunch of young teenage and early 20 hippies who were coming down off of drug highs. And you see the picture of a tent where they're sitting in a tent looking at this old dude. I had an argument with a pastor once. He says, well, we need to get some young people in and change the music. I'm like, well, I mean, you don't have to. Pastor Chuck was an old dude. They listened to him teach the word. He didn't appeal, really. It was a supernatural thing God was doing. He was moving, Number three, their impact stays with the church and continues to bear fruit. Jesus even said in John 15:16, he says, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit and that your fruit should remain, and that whatever you ask the Father in my name, that he may give it to you. I love that. Your fruit will remain. And their ministry has remained through the church, these men with apostolic type ministries. And their ministry never contradicts Scripture. And so those are the things that we see from people who have a ministry that resembles the apostles, because the church can get stuck in the mud from season to season, and God does a fresh work, a movement. You follow me?